everyone. Thanks for being here, for watching and listening, especially if you watched that last video. That was my first one. I'm learning how to edit. I'm sure you can tell. So hopefully this video is just a little bit better and each one hopefully gets a little bit better, a little bit better. So if you have watched the last one and you're watching this, just thank you for sticking with me. It is going to get better. I'm going to get better. I am 52 years old and I have set a goal this year of I want to boulder V7 by the time I turn 53. I turn 53 in November. It's about 8 months from now, if I did my math correctly. And I want to share with you in this video exactly what I'm going to do to try to get there by the time I turn 53. And why is this important? Well, V7 doesn't really matter for you. It could be V2, it could be V4, it could be V11, V14, it could be climbing 510, you're like your first 10A, it could be pointing your first 14A. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We all have the same experience and feelings and emotions about our thing. I just think it's important to have a thing, to have some sort of goal. It doesn't have to be a number. Mine just happens to be right now, but I've used lots of process goals over the years, and I think those are great too. Talk about that at another time. But for right now, I just wanted to get this video out there because I want to be able to document my process of looking forward to hopefully reaching that goal. And here's the thing with goals. At age 52, I'm going to set that goal because that helps me kind of motivate and be willing to train and do all the things or whatever. But at the end of the day, if I don't send V7 by the time I turn 53, life's going to go on. And I am good with that. I'm willing to give it my all. And also, if it doesn't happen, I'll give myself another 6 months to get there. So I think it's a good way to look at goals, to have them, but to be flexible with them so we don't get into defeat or any of that stuff if we don't end up hitting the goal that we have. This is less about that number and more about reframing the narrative that often many of us in midlife carry, that I'm getting older, I'm declining. I talked a lot about that in the last video. And we really want to have that mindset that we can continue to get better and better at climbing, and we can continue to feel vibrant and that we're adapting. A lot of times I think if we limit ourselves, it's more about maybe some self-sabotage, some identity issues, some self-confidence issues, or about playing small. And we don't want to do that right now, right? We're in midlife. It's time to play big. So what's the first thing I did? And if you're looking at setting a goal, what's one of the first things you can do? And that's creating an honest assessment of where you're at. Oh, and this is lovely because I knew this was going to happen with my cats. All right. So I think it's really important that the first thing you do for anything you're thinking about doing is really take an honest assessment of yourself. And one of the great ways to do this is you can ask friends if you have close climbing partners or friends, ask them about what they think about your climbing and where maybe some of the areas are that you could improve. So that's one way to do it. And another way is to just really get honest in assessing yourself. So things I thought about were, I've got a pretty solid V5 base for bouldering. I've got lots of good experience. I've been climbing for right around 20 years. I had 5 years off from about age 42 to maybe 47, something like that. My weaknesses and your weaknesses are the things that you want to really pay attention to. So I have a really hard time with dynamic movement. And I think a lot of us as midlife climbers probably do in general, because we didn't grow up with the climbing gyms that now the younger generations are getting to experience and learn those body positions and that momentum and those movement. A lot of us didn't have that. So we don't really have that base of that kind of movement, that dynamic sort of movement. I also have a hamstring history of hurting my hamstring when I was in Joe's Valley. That was just less than a year ago. And so I really need to make sure my hamstrings are bomber. And one of my biggest limiters is my nervous system. I have and always have very hard time leading above a bowl, taking falls, bouldering on something that's just a little too high. My nervous system will spike and it's almost panicky in nature. And that just makes it's a shutdown mode. And sometimes it's crying. And and all the things. I've gotten better in the last year because I've done some things around that. And I'll spend another episode talking about what I did to help that. But it's ongoing. And I am still going to need to really work on my nervous system in order to be able to hit that V7 goal. Another weakness is just I do recover slower than when I was in my 30s. And that's absolutely okay. That doesn't take away from my ability, I don't believe, to be able to climb V7, but it is something I really want to pay attention to in working towards this goal. There are going to be things I'm looking at: strength training, what my climbing training in the gym looks like, what my training outside looks like. I'm going to do specific things within the weight room, or my little gym here actually, in regards to pulling and pushing strength and all those kinds of things. And I'll do some videos later on that kind of detail. But I want to skip forward to power training, because as we age, this can be, like I was talking about, those dynamic movements, one of the biggest limiting factors. So with power training, I'm planning to limit boulder one time a week. I'm going to make sure I'm taking full rests in between tries and not just going, making sure and maybe even setting a timer for that rest period to make myself rest during that time. And then I'm going to be training some controlled dynamic drills. I talked about a shoulder injury that I had this summer. So I don't want to get out of control with, I want to really be able to manage some of that. So this is going to be controlled dynamic drills, which I'm going to be doing some of those on the campus board. And I think it's important that you really get specific with power training, because that is one of the things that decline. Most of us we can maintain our endurance. In fact, endurance can get better and better and better and better, especially for females. That's a whole other thing. But that power, that is the thing that we're going to want to really focus on, so that we can at least maintain, if not get better at that, and so that it doesn't decline as we age. Protein is going to become my focus in regards to my macronutrients that I'm taking in. And I am going to be shooting for 1 gram of protein per pound of my body weight. I'm at about 120. So I'm going to be shooting for 120 grams of protein every single day. And yes, everyone tells me this is so hard, and it is. And you have to learn a routine and a way of just being in your daily life that you can get that amount of protein in. So important as we age. So important as we age. I'm also going to do a video on how we can get all that protein in a day in a really easy way, because I know a lot of people have a really hard time with that. I am going to shoot for 2 full rest days a week. When I talk about rest days, for me, they are going to be active rest days. They're not going to be just sit on the couch and watch Netflix or do nothing. They're going to be active rest days. So I might go hiking, I might go walking, and then I'm going to not really focus on deloading. I know that's a thing. Periodization training, if you know anything about that, it's like you go on and on for a few weeks and then you deload for a week. What I've found is that the deload weeks just happen. So it might be a time where I'm not feeling super energetic, so I'm just deloading that week. It might be a time I'm traveling, so I'm just automatically deloading that week. So I'm not going to get really strict with my periodization at all. I'm going to just let it flow and see what happens with that. I think it's important to remember grinding does not equal adaptation. We want adaptation, and we need recovery for adaptation. And then really just trying to lower stress in any way I can. That's part of that nervous system stuff, but really working to lower stress in daily life. That's going to be things like mindfulness training. It's going to be things like watching my thoughts. What am I thinking about? How am I thinking about myself? Because how we think absolutely creates how we feel. So if I'm thinking certain thoughts that are creating a lot of stress response in my body, I want to do some thought work to start shifting some of those into more neutral or positive statements, so that I can experience less stress, less cortisol in the body. I talked about the nervous system, and part of the problem with that, along with so many things, is that my body stiffens up when I'm nervous. So when I'm going for a send on something, the time before where I maybe fell off, or I'm not thinking I'm going to send, I take videos of everything so I can watch my movement, and you can see how I really tense up climbing. And that nervous system stuff, if I do the work with that, I know that can help me relax more when I'm going for a big send or a goal send or whatever it is. So that's going to be things like practicing some different breath training protocols before I get on a boulder to try. It's going to be things like visualization, actually taking time before attempts to visualize, and then some controlled fall practice. And I've already started that. We have a bouldering gym here. And so twice now, what I've done is at the end of my bouldering sessions, I start climbing up the wall and jump off and practice falling. And I've been able, because I can never go to the top of our bouldering wall, I get way too scared. And so I've been able to go up to a high point and jump off and take that fall. And that really is giving me more confidence. I've noticed it bouldering outside. I'm a little more confident to go a little bit higher. So I'm going to continue with that fall practice. At my age, at our ages, that nervous system piece can be a really big component to help us progress in our climbing. I'm going to focus as well on strong end ranges of movement. So a lot of times we talk about flexibility, and flexibility is important. And we can get into the passive stretching, just the regular stretching that you think about when you think about stretching, passive stretching. And I'm going to work more on being more flexible but strong in those end ranges. And that's going to be things like Jefferson curls for my hamstrings and other there are other exercises out there that can really help train the end range strength in your mobility and flexibility, and more videos on that to come. And then this is probably the most important thing, what I'm not doing. So I am not going to be training every single day. I am not going to be cutting calories at all. I am not going to chase weight loss, which I would have done in my 20s and 30s and maybe even my early 40s. I'm not going to be doing any of that. I know it doesn't work. I'm at an age now where I know it does not work. And I'm definitely not going to be comparing myself to 25-year-olds, right? We just are in different bodies. We've had different experiences, and that's all okay and beautiful. And what they've got going is okay and beautiful too. But I'm not going to get into comparing myself to some 25-year-old climber at the gym. Midlife athletes, we are not done improving at all. We just really need to use a bit of a different blueprint. That's all it is. We just have to do some things a little bit differently. Our strategies have to change just a little bit. I don't think bumping up a bouldering grade in 6 to 8 months as a 52, 53-year-old is that crazy. I think it's super exciting and I think it's going to be fun. And I hope that if you're listening, maybe you consider setting a goal of one grade up from wherever you're climbing, bouldering or sport climbing, and maybe coming with me on this journey and we can just see what happens in the next 6 to 8 months. It's about being consistent and somewhat disciplined. It's that midlife athletes are not done improving. We just need a different blueprint to follow when we're in midlife, but that does not mean we can't get better, we can't get stronger. So we'll see what happens in 6 to 8 months. If you liked the video or got anything valuable out of it, would you please subscribe? I really need people to subscribe. It's a really important part of this process to grow this channel and grow the community and really get to where I want this to go with everyone. So please subscribe, like the video if you're willing. And I think that's it for now. Talk to you in the next video. Is that a good spot, Miss Zola?